Are you looking for world-class health and wellness advice combined with a dose of inspiration and spiritual encouragement? You've come to the right place. This is nourishment for body and soul. This is Manna, and I'm Dr. Turner. Welcome. Hello, welcome everyone to another edition. This is Dr. Turner. So good to be with you today. So very excited to share some time with you today and with a truly special guest and something I've been working hard to set up for you guys for a while now. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. I have Eric Beck with me, and I'll just introduce him briefly and then allow him to speak on his own behalf, of course. I met Eric through a mutual friend probably a bit over a year and a half ago. And he is a multifaceted person. It's sort of like the more I talk to him, the more facets and fantastic little stories and insights and experiences unfold in his life. And I'm greatly inspired and encouraged by many of them. And you'll hear about some of those today. But in particular, there are many touch points of similarity. We both share a background in teaching. We both share a background playing the trumpet. Although granted, I was sort of just a typical high school hack-along trumpeter, and Eric was actually a professional touring and playing Carnegie Hall and other notable places like that. Which he might want to talk about. But we share passion. We share passion for our families, for running our business in a way that honors God and tries to uplift people spiritually, and for health and wellness, and for keeping ourselves in shape and challenging ourselves physically. Eric has a fantastic journey in that regard. And then we connected a little further along the lines of what he does professionally, which I hope he will touch on, because there are going to be people out there listening who would be interested and who would find tremendous benefit from his services. But he functions as a very high-level business coach to help you systematize and scale your business. And so here at Michael Turner, MD, we've benefited tremendously over the last 6 or 9 months or so under his coaching and his whole team. By the way, on a professional level, it's just been amazing for our business structure. So that's a bit of how we know each other, and welcome, Eric. It's great to have you here today, and I appreciate you making some time for us.
Oh, my man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit on the introductory side, about your background, hit some of those high points and interesting facets, as I mentioned, which truly it's remarkable. And yeah, introduce yourself.
Well, just a slight correction on one.
Oh
I
yeah.
did not get to Carnegie Hall. I didn't, but I did play at the Lincoln Center, Avery Fisher Hall, which is not far away there in New York City,
That's what I
and
was
some other,
thinking of.
yeah, some other places. Yeah, the Hollywood Bowl in Tanglewood. But there's I did make it around, but just not that one.
There we go. All right.
But you said we've got so much in common in terms of our background, which is just true. I really realized though through pursuing music when I was in high school, just to back up a second, I had really two decisions. I was either going to go into music, which had really just caught fire with me probably around 13 or 12, somewhere in there, or I was going to go into physics, which also I read the Feynman letters and got into AP physics in high school, and kind of went down the rabbit hole in terms of the what was being kind of cutting edge at the time. And I was so excited about it, but just straight up honest confession, I just couldn't quite do the math. And so while I love the conceptual part of physics, I was always getting tripped up on the math. And I thought, well, I don't know if I can, what should I do? I did wind up going obviously into music and pursued that. And a part of that was coming to a realization later on that I really loved the construction of the music. I did play trumpet, and I enjoyed that as a performer, but I shifted my focus into composition and arranging, and I thought that I wanted to do movie film scores, and like a John Williams kind of thing. And so headed in that direction. I even actually apprenticed for a while with one of his understudies, a guy named John Tatchgenhorst, which was a mouthful, and I hope I said that right. And just had some great opportunities there. But as it was evolving, what became clear to me was that it wasn't really even about the arranging. It was the circumstance in which you could take a group of like-minded people and bring them to an incredibly high level of performance. And I started seeing the world differently. I was like, it's not about me being on stage. It's not about me being in one of those groups, as fun as that was. But it was really about, I love that that is possible with humans. You could get a group of
Mm,
humans in any configuration, and with the right approach, you can bring them to an incredibly high level of output and achievement. And I realized that's what teachers do. That's what the heart of teaching is skill acquisition, and bringing somebody who wants to do something and is maybe stuck at a certain level, and
mm,
bring them through a set of circumstances or strategies into a way where that becomes something that they now can do. In the music world, we always talked about people who sounded good in the studio versus people who sounded good live. And a really high quality singer or musician sounds great all the time. They don't need the studio, they don't need auto tune or all the effects. They can just sit down on the street corner and they can do it because they own it. That's real skill acquisition. Michael
mm,
Jordan wasn't good because he had the tennis shoes and because he was, playing at a certain basketball court. He's going to be great everywhere. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to empower people to be awesome right now, right on the spot. And of course, there's no shortcuts to that. There's no magic pill. There's no 3 easy steps. I would use this phrase, and we use it at Founders Fire. It's not a matter of talking. It's a matter of training. Like, you just
mm,
have to do the push-ups, to get that thing. So that was really the fire that kind of started there, was this idea of, yes, I love music, but why do I love music? I love it because it is the orderly arrangement of a group effort that
mm,
produces an incredible experience, whether it's jazz or, Miles Davis or Dizzy Gillespie, or it could be classical music or orchestral music like Mozart or Shostakovich, or it could be an athletic effort like karate, which I spent a lot of time in, or even when I was in the Army. The idea of taking a group and bringing them to a place where there's a really, really high level of excellence and achievement, that became the driving factor that I could see. Oh, that's the thread through all those pieces, and of course, it eventually led to business. So that's the shorter version of that
mhm,
of that
mhm.
of that story arc.
Yes, fantastic, brother. And we're going to talk about overcoming challenges in life. That's our series we're doing, and I'm so glad to welcome you as our second guest towards overcoming. And I know
Mhm.
there have been a number of challenges that you've overcome successfully in your life. But before we do that, real quick, even tell us a little bit about your current endeavors. You mentioned Founders Fire. I think a lot of our listenership won't know what that is exactly. So tell us a little bit about Founders Fire, what you're doing currently, and then we'll hit them with our main theme for the day about overcoming. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So, well, I would just say this, when I got out of the music world and kind of got into education, that opened up a lot of doors for me. One of which was in a small town I was living in California. I opened a newspaper and found a job at a business coaching company. And I didn't even know that was a thing. This is 25 years ago. I
Mm,
I never even heard of it, but they said we need someone to help us with our curriculum. And I was like, well, I know about that. I know about scope and sequence, and known to unknown, and hold apart and part to whole, all that good teaching pedagogy. Okay, I'll do it. But I didn't know anything about business. And so when I went to work there, the company was called eMyth. And if some of you guys are business owners or entrepreneurs, or you just are curious, you could go to Amazon right now. And I still think the eMyth Revisited, the book, is still in the top 3 all these years later. It was written in the 90s, for entrepreneurship. And it is this
wow.
amazing book about how to systemize and organize your efforts. And when I got there, I was like, oh, you're doing what we did in orchestra. You're doing what we did in the military. You're doing what we did in the martial arts. You're doing that exact thing. You're just doing it in a different context. And so I took to it like a fish to water. I loved the idea that everything that is out of alignment in a small business is out of alignment with the leader of the small business. It's a giant mirror. And that can sound kind of harsh, but the reality is it's the fastest way to improve, to go through that personal transformation, is to see that this business is just echoing all my decisions. And so what an awesome thing. So I decided to leave eMyth after a little while. Loved my time there. Wanted to start my own company because I wanted to emphasize a few things that weren't really included there. One of which was, how do we restore to people the dignity of good work, of work that's planned well? It's not, just kind of monotonous, whatever, trading time for money. And so as I kind of launched out into discovering like how to do that, I did it like a teacher, and I created a curriculum. I started hiring coaches and training coaches. And just this past year, we passed the 1,000 business mark of folks that we've worked with, to really
Wow.
take them through a process to make sure their business does not run them, that they can really own the business and not be owned by it, for two reasons. One is because it's likely that there are other things they want to do, and they don't want to be trapped inside a very difficult, but maybe very profitable, but time consuming, energy draining, endeavor. And the reason that that happens, of course, is because as entrepreneurs, people start things in a way that gets them off the ground, but they don't know how to build the systems that sustain it, and they don't know how to make it so that it's scalable or sellable. And sometimes it is right to say, hey, I've built this thing up. It's awesome. I want to sell it. I want to do the next thing. So Founders Fire is about giving people back that freedom to really follow the passion in their heart, but to do it in a way where everybody on their team, their employees, et cetera, they're also on that journey of really, what I say is like they're realizing their calling in the context of that role, back to orchestra, like a violin player who's got their favorite piece of Mozart. It's exactly the song in their heart that they're getting out by being in your orchestra, aka your business. And a lot of people just never approached business that way, never thought of it that way. They
Mm.
thought of it like means to an end and cogs in a wheel and all that. And I think we have come to the end of the industrial age idea of trading time for money, buying something for $1, selling it for two, no matter what the cost of the environment or our health or our well-being. It's just about money. And we throw some good ideas into it about relationships, but at its root, though, the systems are still based in something that is unsustainable. There's a very different way to do business. You can call it conscious capitalism. You could call it the sacred economy. There's other ways to describe it. But for me, it is about unleashing people's potential in a game worth playing, not
Mm.
in just a dead end job that drains us all of our gusto. And then we look around and go, well, we ruined our life, we ruined the environment, we're in debt, everyone's miserable, but we made some money and I got a new toy. It's like, hey,
Mm.
there's something more to it. And that's what Founders Fire is about, is helping people go on that journey and get to the other side.
Mm. Phenomenal. I love it, brother. Well, I know I have benefited so much as an individual and in you helping me structure my own organization. I thank you greatly. It was a mirror into myself, my decisions, and sort of a personal makeover as well. It's not just a business makeover, as you said. It takes a little bit of courage, frankly, to
Yeah,
participate. It's a personal
it
makeover
sure
in the
does.
end.
It
Yeah,
does.
brother.
It does.
Um,
Yeah, man.
but
Yeah.
you know what struck me? You were talking about your employees, for example, or even let's say your clients as they interact with your business.
Yep.
You use the metaphor of a violin, and they're fitting in and they're able to express themselves and they're feeling like they're getting their song out there and it's part of this larger symphonic arrangement. I like that musical metaphor, and
Yeah.
it reminded me of this quote. And I'm kind of a geek about quotes, and there's a Thoreau quote, and it's so poignant. It's kind of poignant and sad, but
Hmm.
it's noteworthy and it's eye opening too, right? And it says, most men lead lives of quiet desperation and die with their song still inside them. Right?
Oh,
Oh,
oh, brother. Oh, man. What a
right?
quote.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Like,
powerful.
oh gosh, there's just so many people just marching along, living a life of quiet desperation. And unfortunately, they die with their song still inside of them. They don't
Yeah.
get to get it out, they
Yeah.
don't get
Yeah.
to be all they can be in the world, express themselves in their unique way with their unique gifts, talents, insights, vision, passion that God gave them. Like, what a tragedy. On the flip
Yeah.
side, though, let's flip that around and say, yeah, that's probably true. Probably most people, perhaps, goodness. But on the flip side, it's possible to have the opposite of that. to live a life of, outlandish, loud exuberance and joy and engagement, and sing your song every day and put it on a
That's it.
boombox.
That's
You
it,
got to
man.
just
That's
find the
right.
right mechanism, right?
Throw
You
it
got to
up
find
on
the
your
right instrument
shoulder
and
and
right conductor.
yeah. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the only life worth living, right? Imagine one of these guys in
Mhm.
the '80s. You remember those old like
That's
rap guys?
exactly what exactly. I was
Hey,
just
Brett.
seeing the guy, it's up on your shoulder, you
Yes,
got that little
big
walk and
boombox
you're
on
heading
your
down the
shoulder,
sidewalk.
walking down the street, New York or something like that.
Exactly.
Just loud and proud, big
Yeah.
boombox. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly,
Exactly.
exactly, brother. Exactly. Well, yes. Let's come on to our theme of overcoming. I've got this series now. You're my second guest. It's just phenomenal to have you here and to be able to explore this question. And what I'm trying to do here is help encourage people. We're all facing challenges at different times, and sometimes people are listening to this might be in the midst of truly a real crisis, maybe separated from a spouse, maybe financially
Yeah.
overwhelmed, maybe a death of a loved one, a severe sickness, etc. And so
Yeah.
how can we as humans reflect back on some of the greatest crises that we've come through successfully? What did we learn?
Yeah.
How can we inspire, encourage each other with those takeaway messages, right? So that's my question for you. If we had to narrow it down to, let's say, the one biggest challenge that Eric Beck has faced, right? How he worked his
Yeah.
way through it. Let's dialogue on that, and let's see what you learned and what might be able to inspire people out there in the world. You know.
Man. Well, okay. So in some ways that's an easy question for me, but in other ways I want to say, some people have very, very dramatic things that happen in their life, and some people have quieter lives. They do. And I just want to say at the beginning here that if your situation is not the big dramatic one, it's don't look down on that or think, I don't know, less of it or something, because it's not the big, you're trapped in a burning building and you escaped and saved 30 people's lives. That, again, I think Hollywood tries to teach us those are the moments that matter and the only moments that matter. But I'm going to say, if you're needing to get your health in order, or you're needing to, quit your job and start a business, or you're needing to make a life change like that, and you may say, well, that's just so common and pedestrian, and I want to say it may be common, but it is not pedestrian. It is huge to you. So overcoming, doesn't have to mean the big dramatic, cinematic moment. And so I just want to affirm everybody where you are. Tough is tough, and it only has to be tough to you. And we do have those things. I love the Marcus Aurelius quote. Since you're a quote guy,
Mm,
the impediment to progress is the way to progress. The obstacle to success is the way to success. It's usually kind of summarized as like the obstacle is the way. But I
mm,
really do believe that if we see problems as a workout, as a bench press or a rope climb or a jog, it totally transforms our ability to deal with them. But if we see them, on the other hand, as problems, as tragedies, as crisis, then it tends to put us in a victim mentality, and we tend to get handcuffed by a couple of things. And I'll use that as the way to start into my story. That's what I did. I became a victim. And I did not realize that, but I embodied and inherited and took on an identity of a victim, from a circumstance that probably everybody would say that is horrific and terrible. And what it was is, I was born in 1971 in September. In May of 1971, when my mom was pregnant with me, my father, who was a firefighter in the Atlanta Fire Department, took a buddy shift on a Friday night, who called up in the afternoon and said, "Hey, look, I want to go on a date with my wife, and I'm supposed to be on duty tonight. Can we swap out?" And my dad was like, "Sure." My dad was kind of known as being gregarious and fun and a prankster and all that stuff, but a great chef. He didn't cook professionally, but everybody said he was a great cook, and kind of everybody's friend. And so he said, "Sure." They go in, and about 11:30 that Friday night, they got a 4 alarm, call that there was a building in downtown Atlanta that was on fire. So several different engines responded. I think altogether about 55 people were there. When my dad's crew got there, the first group was just coming out, having exhausted their oxygen supply. So my dad's team went in, and within a minute or two, the entire building exploded and collapsed. And what happened was that the gas mains were not labeled correctly. So when the firefighters popped the manhole cover, getting to the scene, they're supposed to turn off the natural gas, of course, to the building that's on fire. They did that, but they weren't labeled correctly. So they turned off the gas to the adjacent building. So this building's burning, 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 and the gas is just feeding into it. And it just took that amount of time for the gas to catch. It killed my father. It killed 3 other firefighters, and it wounded about 30 firemen on the street. People were blown out of their shoes. It was a really terrible incident. And that happened, and my mom got a phone call sometime in the morning, or I'm not sure if it was a call or they actually came there. So I think they did actually come. And she, obviously was just in this massive crisis to lose her husband. She's pregnant. It was her first child. And it was a tragedy. And so I think everybody would say that's horrific. There's some terrible ironies too. Not only did he take the buddy shift, but it was actually on a street in Atlanta called Lucky Street. I mean, just like what? Like this is like out of a nightmare. So I go through a lot of trauma in the womb. And in the womb, when your nervous system is forming, you're very susceptible to all kinds of things. The chemicals in your mom's body. My mom was a smoker, as most people were back in the 70s, and especially in her line of work, she was an emergency room nurse, so she dealt with a lot of trauma anyway. And so I wound up being born about 6 weeks premature and was like 4.5 pounds. So I
Mm.
spent my first couple of weeks in the neonatal unit under the bilirubin lights and all the stuff that they did. Not an easy start. Not an easy start, but maybe even worse was that was with me. And by the time I was 4 or 5, I was asking, where's my dad? The kids at school or my friends, they have
Mm.
dads, where's my dad? So it lived as this tragedy that would define me really until probably college, because I just kept thinking, poor old Eric, like somebody needs to help. I can't really get to where I need to get to unless somebody helps me. And that's true in many ways. We all need help from other people. And of course, growing up without a father is not the worst thing. You could grow up with an alcoholic father that beats you to within an inch of your life all the time. That's worse, or you're abused in some other way. So I certainly don't want to say like this is the worst thing that's happened on the planet. Not at all. Not by a long stretch. But for me, like I was saying earlier, in my life, it was the big, bad, difficult thing. And what I had to come to was a realization that my father is dead, but I'm not dead. My father went through an experience, and that changed both of our lives, permanently. But I don't have to live in the shadow of death. And what I found out was that I had started to develop a series of habits, one of which was I'm a victim. By definition, I'm broken. I didn't have a dad. I don't know how to be a man. I don't understand the world through that lens. And so there's this neediness, this fundamental insecurity that's always surrounding my life, right? The other side of that equation was not only having that deficit, but then seeing I can't get out of it. Something else bad is about to happen. So I was plagued with depression and anxiety about, I bet tomorrow the big terrible thing's going to happen. And while I didn't always consciously think that, I think I did always feel it at a nervous system level. I was waiting for the jolt that I'm sure my mom got when she saw the fireman and the nurse walk up to her apartment. Like, her heart jolted. She knew there's only one reason that's going to happen. So she knew. So that jolt hits us so hard. And for me, it kept jolting. Like it never stopped jolting. And I've done therapy and work on this, and with an amazing a set of experts, one of which specializes in the nervous system development, in utero, and just some fascinating and also difficult truths to have to recognize. But that definitely was the big thing, that set up a pretty big Mount Everest for me, to have to decide, is the obstacle the way, or is the obstacle just going to crush me and limit me and live as this curse in my life?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, brother, I can see. I'm feeling emotions and skin on my hair, standing up here a little bit too, and feeling just kind of crestfallen as you're taking me through this and just imagining all this. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot to that. um, so to how what let's start then. As you're in college,
Hmm.
you're struggling in the ways that you mentioned for the reasons that you mentioned. How did you start to lift off and get out of the struggle then? What series of events or what sort of thought processes shifted in your mind? Why wasn't, the next year of college just the same as the previous 20 years of your life had been, I guess? What
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's pretty funny, our passions are a real window into our blueprint. I feel like every human has been designed, has been made, is not just a miracle of random processes. I think somebody said it's like 10 to the 230, that 230 zeros, one to the to 1 plus 230 zeros is the chances that the RNA sequence could have occurred on its own. And it just stretches the mind to incredulity to go, yep, it's just random. We're just here randomly. So I really do think the purposefulness in how we've been created indicates to us that there is a blueprint. There is a way that we're made, each person uniquely and individually. And I feel like one of the ways into that roadmap and to discovering that is our passions. What is it that lights us up? And it was music. And I don't know why. My mom took me as a single mom. She did remarry when I was 13, when it was just me and her, I remember her taking me to a little theater in Chattanooga. We grew up, so a year or so after my father passed away, she and I moved to Tennessee where her family was, and that's where I grew up. And so we went to this little theater called the Tivoli Theater in Chattanooga, and I saw Tchaikovsky, the Nutcracker Suite, and saw the ballet. And I remember, I guess I was like 8, maybe, or 7. I just couldn't believe that what I was hearing was coming from what I was seeing. Right? I'd never seen an orchestra, never really been around live music that way. And I was like, as this dates me, right? This sounds like a record. This sounds like a 72, that big record. I'm like, what? I can't believe this. And I was so enchanted by it and so captured by it. But I didn't really come back to it really again, maybe until I was about 13. And that passion for music had been building all this time. And I was so excited to learn, how do you make those sounds? How it's almost like learning magic in a way. Like, how do you do this? And so that passion is what took me into music. And that's what took me face to face with a major limitation. I truly, genuinely loved music, but I also loved and needed approval in an unbalanced way. And I became a music Nazi. I remember a friend of mine in college saying, how this is after I performed at the Lincoln Center, after Hollywood Bowl, after touring, after all the stuff, a lot of accolades, a lot of blah blah blah. Um, people spend their whole lives to do those things, and it's very difficult to do those things. But there I am at 18 or 19, and I've been able to accomplish those things. But yet I'm miserable. And my roommate, my college roommate, who was also a really wonderful musician, he said to me, Eric, when is it that you started hating music? And I was like, what? And it was after a movie. We had come out of a movie, and I was commenting on all the problems that I heard in this soundtrack. You know, this chord didn't resolve. It could have resolved this way better. Or the violins were out of tune, or the tempo was too quick. I was just nah 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 negative, right?
Mm.
And upset about it. You know, like it should have been, I don't know, it was Boston Philharmonic or the LA or the London, whoever, some orchestra, right? And when he said this, it was like a really necessary slap in the face. And I just was like, oh my goodness. You know, I didn't say this out loud, but internally I was like, that's really true. I have used my passion and my knowledge about music to become this incorrigible critic. I don't enjoy music. I'm at a zero when there's no problems. It's not like that was a wonderful piece of music. Maybe there were some mistakes, but I so love what's in that musician's heart and what they brought onto the stage. What a great thing, right? I was like, yeah, the microphone was feeding back. They should have used an SM57 to mic that kick drum instead of this microphone. Like all the technical details of it. And he was like, when did you start hating music? And that was a first shot across the bow that was helping me realize music had become a way for me to get my father's approval with no father. Like there was a hole in my psyche that needed that fatherly blessing. And I was not obviously not getting it. And so it was this desire to get approved. We played that show in New York City, and Madonna came, and this again dates me. Madonna was in the audience. Martina Navratilova was a very famous tennis player at the time, was in the audience, and Blue Man Group, and we got a write up in the Times, and you know it was all about, is the audience going to get it? You know, it was all about, are they going to perceive all these little nuances and appreciate all this stuff? And while that's fine, that is fine on the surface, what was driving me though in that was, I don't think I'm okay, good, lovable until somebody else says that I am.
Mm.
And in that moment, in that conversation, I got a whiff of that. I didn't get all of it, but I got just a scent of, you are not a victim any more than you're making yourself a victim. You are disempowering yourself by making everybody else in charge of your happiness. So the critics, you know, at this one event or this one, concert, don't like
Mhm.
something. They're in charge of you now. You know, instead of saying, look, I'm making music for me, I'm making music to say what's in my heart. I was not. I had become highly proficient at making music for other people to get them to do something. And that was this wound from childhood had grown into a mindset of disempowerment. And that comment was, ironic as it is, I mean, it doesn't seem like a very deep, sort of comment.
Mm.
And I don't
Mhm.
know that he knew all what was behind it, but it cracked the armor enough that I started asking this question. And it's why I got out of music, because
Mm.
I could feel the dissatisfaction, but I didn't know why. And I couldn't have articulated it the way I'm doing now, all these years later, 30 years later. But that was the first kind of opening that was giving me, frankly, the courage, or maybe the anger, or maybe both, to go, something's not right over here. And I think I have to probably go face the, not use the funny statement here, but, face the music and
Mhm.
start to get honest with myself about what is driving this desire for, achievement, that I've been,
Mm.
dedicated to at that point for about 15 years.
Mhm. 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 Wow. Okay. This is fascinating storyline evolving here. I just love how the smallest phrases, sometimes things that are spoken, something the person may have even forgotten, will strike us at just the right time. And in my view, I see God's hand in it. It's like God will just amplify and highlight something that somebody says and just bring it and hit us to us, or keep it in our forefront of our consciousness at just the right time to kind of like turn our course as you described it, or crack the armor a little bit. Okay. So you're in college, you realize I have this wound, this gaping wound for approval, not having a father. I've been trying to live it out and get it through musicianship. I'm not being satisfied. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. Um,
Yeah.
I'm becoming critical of something that's beautiful. I need some healing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next chapter in that is depression. I left music, within, I don't know, 10 months of that, I was done, and I didn't know why. I just couldn't see playing trumpet. That sounds so arrogant and haughty, but I just couldn't see doing that anymore. And it's because I lost my way. Like, my engine of pain and victimhood was exposed, and it kind of shut off. And then I was like, well, now where's my fuel anymore?
Mm,
And so I would say for a couple of years, I was finishing up my degree in education and trying to figure out what to do, and really just kind of confused. And really, the next, I think, pivotal moment for me came in discovering what I'm going to call um, worldview, but a way to take my belief system kind of to the next level. I had grown up in the Baptist church, went to church 3 times a week, certainly knew a lot of the Bible, and all that kind of good stuff. And it was a very, very important part of my life. And in this time period, I had kind of gotten to the place where I didn't really see how it integrated with the rest of my life. It fit very well with the idea of something bad's about to happen, though. Part of
mm,
that
mhm,
fire and brimstone, sort of thing is like, God's going to hit you with a lightning bolt at any minute. It could happen at any minute. It's about to happen. Or
mm,
on the positive side, the rapture will come. Jesus will come back, and the clouds will part, and then suddenly we'll all be taken away. Either way, there's this feeling of this impending, it's about to be over kind of thing. And so
mm,
that wove right into this. So when I was in college, I was able to come across some teachings that presented the Christian worldview in a very, very, very different light. And one of the things that it opened my eyes to was the idea of thinking multi-generationally and thinking beyond just, me and mine, and it
mm,
all being about my life and whatnot. And that was really the moment where I started to see some of the kind of 10-cent words on this are like
mhm,
ontology or epistemology or teleology, the comparative worldview. And I started to see, there's a lot of value sets that exist behind things. And I'll give it just a simple
mhm,
example here. So you could say, like, music for money. Now that's an interesting idea, actually, because we think, well, you go to a concert, you pay for tickets, or you buy music on Apple Music, or back in the day, you go buy a record or cassette or whatever. And you think, yeah, that's the commercialization of music is just obvious. People like music and they pay for it. But if you actually kind of examine the worldview behind that, you start to see, well, what you're saying is that someone is not just creating a product or service for money, but they're actually taking a part of their deep personal expression, and they're doing this in a way that's driven by what people will pay for. And if you examine that worldview more deeply, you start to see that people will buy things because they want them, not necessarily because they're good for them. So somebody produces a song that is very hateful, very aggressive, very destructive, and they're like, yeah, I'm putting that out there for people to buy. Somebody who is very angry, very hateful, very destructive likes that music. And we're now producing a cycle in that person's life of emphasizing, something that may be out of balance in a way that's not actually good for this person, but hey, we made this sale. I started to just have a more philosophical journey around the ideas and the values behind what we do, and realizing that if those go unexamined, guess what? I'll put it in my own life. Eric, you're going to stay a victim because you're not examining your worldview. And your worldview gone unexamined is going to lead to a patterned problem set that you'll keep experiencing. Kind of like until the splinter is out, you're going to
Mm,
keep having that infection. And it's like that happens to us mentally. And I never heard that before. I read a few books about this at that time and kind of had these mind-blowing moments of my view of the world, of religion, of God being tremendously expanded way past just, do you go to church on Sunday, and, do you go to vacation Bible school? It was really expanded for me. And so part of that became an ownership opportunity. Do you own your beliefs, or do you just believe what you've been told to believe? Do you own your life, or are you just a passenger, just floating down the river, out of control, just going wherever the riverboat takes you? And so that part of my journey in my mid 20s was very much about kind of deciding to take ownership of my beliefs.
mm,
And as I was, growing just as a person, I started to see a pathway, maybe not as clearly as I eventually did, but I started to see a pathway that was taking me towards, I need to own what I believe. I need to own my weaknesses. I need to stop with the blaming and the explaining it away and poor me. And I started to find that I needed to let my dad die. That the real, thing in the bottom of all this was, I have to let go of that. That's not who I am. It did happen. I'm not denying it. And I think it's okay to say it did happen to me. That's okay too, right? But now the question is, what am I going to do with that workout? Am I going to keep walking into the gym and kicking my toe on that dumbbell and cursing it and feeling sorry for myself? Or am I going to squat down there and pick that thing up and start using it to build strength? And that change in worldview of owning this situation instead of it owning me really became the genesis for what I would say is the calling that I'm still following through Founders Fire to this day. It really, it never seems that way on the front end, right? On the front end, it seems so random and so, difficult and whatever. But when you look back, you start to see that through line. And that's certainly when it started to get clearer for me in that chapter.
mhm, mm. Wow, brother. I see an image there of, as you mentioned, walking in, kicking the dumbbell, feeling frustrated, right? Same old kind of negative thought loop happens, versus
Yeah,
picking this
yeah,
dumbbell up and using it somehow and then trying to do something with it. Now,
yeah,
in your case, so I wonder how you resolve this tension a little bit, right? Because
yeah,
at the same time, very pointedly, you mentioned you had to let your dad die, truly, like you had to let go of your dad. At the same time, you talked about kicking the dumbbell, but then like picking it up and actually using it as a workout, right? So
yeah.
was it more of an engagement or of a disengagement, I guess, with this whole trauma?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a great way to phrase it. I guess in some ways it was both. I needed to let go of the identity of I'm the poor little kid with no dad. There's
right.
that. But I needed to say, okay, I don't have a dad though. That's a difficulty.
Yeah.
What can I do with that can help me grow? And part of it
Mm,
was, again, I'd call this like a 15 or 20-year process. I wouldn't even
mm,
say it's
mm.
completed at this point, but it started being that question of, what does it mean to be a man?
This wraps up another edition of Manna. I enjoyed our time together, and I hope that this has inspired you towards a healthy and happy life. Be blessed.